The scariest part of the Backrooms movie wasn't the monster, but the fact that the only one who can save you is yourself. Captain Clark is the entity or monster you would say in this movie, and I felt that the more scarier part in the movie was the fact is that nobody's gonna come to save you, and that at the end of the day, if you want change to happen, you have to be in the mentality that you want to change and you are willing to change. And sadly, as we can see in the end of the movie, Clark accepts that he does not want to change, and he just accepts these self-destructive habits inside of him. See, Clark had help. He had his therapist, Mary, and although he didn't have too much of a support system, he still had somebody. If Clark had nobody, then the audience could blame his circumstances, his environment. But he had opportunities, in his role playing to really see how him arguing with his wife, how it could have gone differently and how it could be a way to mend that solution. He had people who cared, even his employees, which sure are just teenagers who just want some money. Even then, you still kind of care about him. But the tragedy isn't that nobody helped him. The tragedy is that he kept rejecting help. Maybe it was ego, I don't really know. But at the end of the day, there was an important distinction as he had opportunities to change, but he just rejected it. A lot of people think if somebody would just help me, it'll be fine. But help means nothing if you don't actually want to change. Now, again, the monster is just Clark, Captain Clark. See, in the movie, still lives are basically copies of persons, not necessarily a one to one copy, but the more the backrooms can understand of you, the more better the copy is. That's kind of why Captain Clark bleeds and is way more, I guess, accurate to what Clark looks like, but I don't know. Now, obviously, at the beginning of the film, Clark thinks the world is against him, his job, his life, his relationship, his dreams of being an architect. He believes it's just circumstance and everyone else's fault. And honestly, that's kind of comforting because if you're the victim, then you don't have responsibility. But deep down, if you want your life to change, you need to change it yourself and understand that maybe you have to take some accountability for your actions. See, I think the kitchen scene is probably the most important scene in the movie. This is where the movie's message really hits. We see a confrontation of Clark himself and how he accepts that he doesn't want to change. It's like how he said in the start of the film, it's just how he's wired. And we also see Mary's crash out, as she also puts it into perspective that she can't help him. And like she says, she has no fucking clue to how to help him. And she tells him straight up that it's not the anger, it's not the coming home late at night. It's the whining, the complaining, thinking that everything else is not his problem. But obviously, Clark doesn't want to change, and we see all this culminate in Captain Clark entering the room and eventually killing and biting into Clark. Because this is a physical manifestation of Clark's inner demons taking full control. Clark doesn't want to change for the better. He doesn't want to make a positive impact in his life and work on his dreams, maybe work on the warehouse or just mend relationships. He doesn't want to do this. These self destructive habits all culminate with the monster understanding that Clark is no longer the victim. He understands that all of the problems Clark faces is because of him. And just like how he did to the other victims, he eats Clark. And you're meant to understand that at the end of the day, no one's going to come to save you. And if you don't want to change, and if you don't have this mentality of changing, you're just going to end up someone like Clark. And Clark is a very lonely but very understandable character. See, I don't hate Clark and I actually feel bad for him, but you can understand why he's in this situation, and his death is definitely his fault, if I'll be honest. See, the brain doesn't wire itself for the path that's most beneficial or optimal. It tries to go the path of least resistance and the path that's comfortable and that we've faced before. The brain loves familiarity, even when that familiarity is destructive, because familiar suffering feels safer than unfamiliar growth. And I think this all again comes down to that. In the end of the day, nobody's going to come to save you. There's going to be people in your life, family members, friends, loved ones that can support you, encourage you, guide you, and love you. But they cannot do the work for you. They can't force devotion and discipline. They can't force accountability. They can't force growth. At some point, the decision has to come up to you. Clark wasn't killed by the backrooms. He was killed by the parts of himself he tried to avoid. He was killed by things that he kept on feeding, like his anger, his bitterness, his self destruction. The scary part is that most people have their own version of that monster. Maybe it's procrastination, addiction, or self hatred. The question isn't whether the monster exists, the question is whether you're confronting it or feeding it.